All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another movie comm. And today we are going to be commentating while watching The Shadow, which is a film that came out in 1994 starring Alec Baldwin. Now, I am watching this on Blu-ray, so I am just at the part where the Universal logo is appearing. I paused it there, so those of you that want to follow along, get ready to press play. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press play. Now, one thing that I will say was when I was a kid and when I saw this movie, it kind of became like a cult for me. I really enjoyed this film, despite, my slightly differing opinions of it now as an adult. But at the end of the day, it's still a fun movie to watch. And one thing that keeps popping up in my mind that I simply can't avoid is that back in the day, and especially if you see it here, it's very reminiscent here that Alec Baldwin could have made a hell of a Batman if he was cast. I mean, especially since he has a lot of that Bruce Wayne swag going about him, and he's got a heck of a voice. He could easily do a Batman voice. And he kind of shows that a little bit in this film, but Batman's Batman and the Shadow is the Shadow. So there are differences. And I'm actually kind of slightly surprised that at this point we haven't really gotten a modern day version of this movie. Or should I say, I mean, it's been a long time since this movie came out. So I'm thinking it's been almost 30 years. It's been 29 years since this movie came out. And I'm like, how, I can't help but think to myself, like, how have we not had a new Shadow movie? Obviously, with today's modern technology and today's modernness and everything. And you can certainly have actors that could all obviously play the role and all the characters that are in it. And I'm sure there's plenty of lore behind everything to go with it as well. But obviously, even back in the day, the special effects for their time were pretty cool. Some better than others, right? I mean, you'll be able to tell if you're following along. Some of the effects are still looking good, and some of the other effects are just. But basically, according to this movie, which I'm sure is a little bit different from the source material, which I'm not as familiar as I should be, but I've read a few things here and there on it. So, basically, in this film right here, the man who is the Shadow, Lamont Cranston, is he had a very dark past where he was a very bad person, a very evil person, and things ended up changing. We'll go into that as the movie goes on. And as you see him in the background, he's got long hair, he's got like really long nails and everything like that. So and he's definitely not in the United States. And he's known as Yinko. And at this point, they've apparently, where they got this one dude, and they kidnapped this one dude, and they're threatening to kill him and stuff like that. And he ends up taking one dude out and holding another guy hostage. And despite the fact that this guy worked with Yinko, so to speak, the guy who's holding him hostage, he's like, "Woo, you're a wonderful friend, like a father to me." And he instructs his men to shoot through him in order to get rid of the guy they wanted to get rid of. And everybody around him is pretty much laughing. And then he says something in a foreign language that's actually not in the subtitles. But at the end of the day, the man that we see in the beginning of this film, Lamont Cranston, is a very dark and evil person who all of a sudden, a holy man appears to him in his dream. And this man is the Tulku, actually, and he has he's basically got the powers of the Shadow, so to speak. And then two of the Tulku's men come in, and they're able to basically knock him out and take him. And they're going to take him to the Tulku Temple. which we'll get into more in a minute. And one thing I have to say is that the cinematography is really good in this film, especially since this film takes place over many years prior to what the time was. So they got the cinematography right, and I'm sure they built some really good sets, and some things are paintings and some things are special effects. So, and back then the effects weren't as good as they are today, but it also depended on the effects themselves. Some effects were better than others, but it really depends on what you're looking at. And at this point, he is taken to the Tulku, and got all sorts of monks with musical instruments playing. Got some Chinese drums. Well, or Asian drums, basically. Some bells and such, and then they walk away. And then the main Tulku kind of appears out of nowhere. He's like, he appears and disappears, so to speak, in a way. And of course, Lamont is like, yeah, you have any idea who you kidnapped? And he's like, Lamont Cranston. And he's like, you know my real name? So his real name is not Yinko, it's Lamont Cranston. And the Tulku knows everything about him. And his voice sounds very deep. And this guy can literally like read his mind if he wanted to and see through him. And the Tulku at this point has unique powers, the powers of the shadow, so to speak. And at this point, he's offering a chance to redeem him, but there's no choice. So at this point, he wants to turn him into a good guy by teaching him the powers of the shadow. Now, he grabs a knife, or it's referred to as a knife in this movie, but it's more like, I don't know, kind of like a dagger, but not really a dagger, but it's a spear. And it can fly on its own. It has its own phase, its own personality, so to speak. And you can't control it through strength. It has to be controlled with mental strength, which Lamont currently possesses none of. And he grabs it after it misses him, and it bites him. And it's just pretty much metal, like biting in your hand. And at this point, Yinko, or I'm sorry, not Yinko, but Lamont is, his life is very well threatened by this knife. So the Tulku calls the knife, doesn't listen the first time, but the knife, he calls him back again, and then he goes back. So it goes back to the Tulku. So, and Lamont asks, am I in hell? And he's like, not yet. So basically, this is where we go into we get to see through lettering what Lamont went through for the next 7 years. So I'm going to read it. The price of redemption for Cranston was to take up man's struggle against evil. The Tulku taught him how to cloud men's minds, to fog their vision through the sheer force of concentration, leaving visible the only thing he can never hide, his shadow. Thus armed, Cranston returned to his homeland, that most wretched layer of villainy we know as, and it cuts to New York City at night. And this is 7 years later. So just like Batman, Cranston was gone for 7 years, if not longer, maybe actually. So again, the cinematography is great. The night vision of everything looks great. The cars of I think it's the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm sorry. It was created in 1931, so I don't know if this was taking place in 1931. I'm not entirely sure. But right here at this point, you got a few bad guys, and they have a gentleman hostage that they bricked his legs, so that because they're planning to toss him over the Golden Gate Bridge in order to get rid of him or whatnot. So, and apparently he's seen something. So anyway, but instead of just skipping to this part, I personally would have loved to have seen exactly the kind of training Lamont Cranston went through. It's left to imagination, but at the same time, I'm sure for the fans that are really dedicated Shadow fans, can actually look it up somewhere, or maybe there's a comic or a book or a graphic novel that has been made about the character in terms of what exactly he went through training, which actually has me very curious, because he learned from a monk, right? Or perhaps many monks. So my assumption is he obviously learned various forms of unarmed combat, and obviously there's the meditation factor, but it's like the more interesting part as well, the more mysterious part is like, how did he get the ability to cloud men's minds like a Jedi, right? How did he do that? Like what I mean, well, not how did he do that, but like what kind of training did he have to go through in order to possess it? Like it would have been nice to show some of that, right? I mean, we saw in The Empire Strikes Back, we saw Luke's training. So it's like, why couldn't we see Lamont Cranston's training? Even if it is familiar in terms of what we've seen before in perhaps some other films, why can't we see Lamont Cranston's training? That's something that I've always been interested in. I mean, it sucks that it skipped to this part, and I know it was probably for time's sake and everything like that, but it's like, dude. And then over here, the shadow now pretty much just has appeared in voice, through laughter and the fact that he knows what's going on. He knows that this guy over here that took this guy hostage basically murdered a policeman, and he's like, I want you to go to the police and confess to it. And now he's got his Tommy gun out and he's shooting everything in sight, almost his own men. So one of his men's like, I think you got him. He's like, yeah, you're damn right I did, or damn right I. And then he stopped, and then there's something right next to him. Bam! It appears out of nowhere like smoke. It's the shadow, and punching him, like appearing and disappearing. So, and the thing about his powers is that they work on the weak-minded, similar again to a Jedi. So the question is, did the shadow gain inspiration from George Lucas, or was it vice versa? Probably vice versa, because Star Wars didn't come out until 1977, and this here was created in 1931. So basically at this point, it looks like smoke. The smoke from Mortal Kombat is fighting against this bad guy, and he's got him over the rail, and he threatens to drop him, but he doesn't, and he's scared shitless, and he's like, okay, I'll confess, and then he throws him through the car windshield basically, and he starts laughing, and then his shadow appears behind these guys, and then he starts to form right in front of their eyes, and he basically he's a man with, he almost looks like a cowboy in a sense, with the hat, and he's got his face covered. But the thing is, he's able to make his face look different, so that way he's truly disguised. Like he looks kind of older and very different than what he really looks like. So he's actually really disguised. So he's able to bring out that side of him that makes him look different. And then when he lets go of that, he basically turns into himself again, Lamont Cranston that we know, but without the long hair and without all the evil and such and such. So, and he's also got a couple of guns that he dual wields. And another thing is that his eyes change as well. Whenever he's the shadow, his eyes change completely as well, which can also be intimidating as well. But it looks really cool. I don't know if they used special effects for that, or if they used what's it called? Contacts, special looking contacts to make it look like that. But yeah, pretty cool. Going in, telling Mo to drive, and then he's got his own cab driver basically that's loyal to him. And one day the cab driver needed the Shadow's help. The Shadow saved his life. I mean, the Shadow kind of appeared out of nowhere, so and now the Shadow basically tells him, I saved your life and now it belongs to me. And he's like, it does? So basically at this point, he's telling him that you're going to become one of my agents, like dozens of others all over the world. And he asks if he can talk to his wife about this. He's like, no. Very secretive at this point. So, and Mr. Shredman is going to instruct him on everything else. And they have a line of code that they say, when you hear one of my agents say the sun is shining, you're going to respond with the ice is slippery. So basically a way to identify each other. Be like, yeah, I'm an agent, you're an agent, blah, blah, blah. So And yeah, at this point, the Shadow is he's there are some Batman vibes here and there, but at the same time, it's completely different. And I would really love to see a modern day version of this character. And he likes to laugh a lot. The Shadow likes to laugh a lot. It gets to the point to where this man over here thinks he's crazy. Like he's laughing hysterically. And obviously in some of these sets you can tell that these are paintings. And back in the day they looked really good, but yeah, like this is an actual set, an actual scene, stuff like that. This is real, but like in some of the backgrounds and stuff, they definitely used a lot of paintings and old school effects. But it matches and it's good, and you just like every other movie, there's a suspension of disbelief. And one more thing, he's gonna put a ring on this guy's finger that's a very special type of ring that he's not supposed to remove. And it basically goes off whenever they need it, I guess. And he basically asks about the cab drivers, like, who are you? He's like, well, somebody that owes him his life. I'm just like you. So when it just goes to show you right there. Except the cab driver and Mr. Shredman, the cab driver, and Lamont have a slightly more complex relationship. And I'm sure in the graphic novels or the comics or whatever, it's more pronounced than it is here. So as you can see right there, bam, he just changed. Like his face changes like that when he lets go, because everything is centered around his mental strength at this point. So, and after that, he basically lives kind of the life of a rich playboy to a certain extent, I guess. Maybe not like Bruce Wayne, but we know he's got money. And right now he's got his tux on, and he's at the Cobalt Club now, where they have live music, and gonna go and chill with his uncle who's waiting, who just happens to be, I believe, the chief of police. So there's that as well. And of course, over here you get a really, really nice overhead shot of the club. So good old dance floor, and yeah, a nice blue and white vibe. If you're Greek, you're definitely gonna love it, because Greeks are all about the blue and white vibe. Those are the colors of the flag, and they're all about that. And look, when you look at Alec Baldwin in this scene, it's again, he could definitely pass for Bruce Wayne. I mean, just look, he definitely passes as Bruce Wayne at this point, in my humble opinion. And then he said there's a little accident on the bridge. And then as usual, you got 2 martinis, not 1 but 2, with olives, not onions. Some people get onions, but he's all about the olives. And here we're introduced to Penelope Ann Miller's character. And man, back in her day, my goodness, this woman, something else. Gorgeous. And classy, gorgeous, just, yeah. And she looks good in that white dress, or ivory. I don't know if it's white or ivory, same difference to me. And he's completely distracted by her, and he can't understand what his uncle is saying. So eye contact back and forth, and he is, believe it or not, kind of he kind of subliminally uses powers on her, and kind of to a certain extent read her mind. And he got a message from the Shadow, and then he just told Lamont that he's going to put a task force on the Shadow. And then right then and there, he goes dark, his eyes change, his face doesn't change though. And then he starts doing his old Jedi mind trick thing, to where he's like, you're not going to do that, you're not going to pay any attention to these reports from the Shadow, you're not going to point a task force, there is no Shadow. He's like, no, if there is no Shadow, if there were, I'd be Eleanor Roosevelt. Funny. But see that it just goes to show you right there that Lamont Again, the again the Jedi mind trick, so to speak, implemented in full force right there. And I really like the effect how it went dark and he went completely dark, like as if there was a shadow over him. And I really like that effect. And how his voice like went darker. Like all they had to do with his voice was to kind of have a certain, I don't know, I don't want to use the word echo, but uh but yeah. Um so and she wanted a glass of a specific type of wine and Lamont knew what it was. And he already had the waiter order it for her. And she's like, "Yes, how'd you know?" He's like, "From the gentleman." Gentleman? So, and he says, "It's the strangest thing. I've got this sudden craving for Peking duck." And she's like, "Wow, I was thinking the same thing. So odd." And then he's like, "Care to join me?" And then they go out to a Chinese restaurant. And he can also speak Mandarin. And he only knows how to speak Mandarin. He doesn't know how to speak, I guess, the other language. And then he's looking at her and she's like, "Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it." So he was thinking that he liked what she wore, but she's like, "You just complimented me on my dress, right? Didn't you?" And he's like, "No, I didn't, but I was thinking it." So that right there tells Lamont that she possesses a special ability that she's completely unaware of, kind of similar to his own. So she is, to a certain extent, he can't even use all of his powers on her, even if he wanted to, because she has a form of mental strength, and he's very, um, and he's aware of it, and he's like genuinely like surprised, and to a certain extent, kind of keeps his distance because of it. Um, Not because he has bad intentions or anything like that, but she's definitely different. And Mr. Shredman, the cab driver, basically says that she's different than your usual dames, and he's like, "More than even she knows." And then he's like, "How?" He's like, "Well, she has complete ability that she's completely unaware of." So, and it's like, he's like, "Are you gonna see her again?" And he's like, "No, it's much too dangerous." She's like, "Dangerous?" He's like, "Dangerous for who?" "Dangerous for Mimo." So so he so yeah, he knows. He knows quite a lot. He doesn't It's dangerous for him. Now, why is it dangerous for him? I guess we'll find out later on in the film. And he's passed out over here on the couch after having a drink, which looks like Hennessy or something like that. Probably it's on the tip of my tongue. Hennessy's the brand. But anyway, cool fire effect with with laughing, and it sets on fire and it wakes him up, causes the cup to explode, and he knows something's coming. And that something is going to come from the Museum of Natural History. So, which is pretty cool. Nice little look over the museum. Of course, you got your classic dinosaur skeletons, which you can't go wrong with. Dinosaur skeletons, you can't really go wrong with dinosaur skeletons in any movie, really. Whether it's a movie like this or whether it's a different kind of film. It's yeah. And at the end of the day, you're looking at this, and you're like, "Wow, it's pure silver." And we haven't seen that. Well, it's obviously, well, the thing is, apparently the guys over here at the history of the museum, they think it's well, first of all, the gentleman that they called in to check this out says that it's beautiful. However, he noticed that it's also solid silver. So there's a little bit more to it than that. But he's aware of some of the writing that's on there, so he kind of clears it up a little bit, and but he knows the letters, so power of God on earth, blah blah blah, the seal of the emperor of mankind. So I'm assuming he knows what that is. Imogen. This is the silver coffin of Temujin. Who's Temujin? The man who very nearly conquered the globe 8 centuries ago. So it was the birth name of Genghis Khan. And of course, they didn't say what the shipper's address was. Label just had the country of origin. So right now he wants to go make a telephone call. And then it tells the guard, whatever you do not open it. So yeah, of course, you're going to leave the guard there all by himself. Which is pretty interesting. Got the guard over there all by himself, whistling. And of course, like classic movie fashion, you think something's going on. You hear a little bit of a screech sound. And he's like, where'd that come from? Just ignores it. And then one of the one of the seals unlocks all by itself and just opens, almost kind of like a magnet in a sense, but not really, but you know, you get the deal. And there's multiple seals, so and then another one opens and then it closes and then another one, and it's like, what the? And then all the seals start to go crazy and the whole thing starts to shake. And I don't know, if I was him, I'd be running by now. And now his eyes, you know, like the first thing he says is join me or die. And he's like, and you look at his eyes, it looks pretty scary the way his eyes are. So he's using his powers basically. He's got the same powers that the Tulku has, actually. Spoiler alert. And right here is taking over the guy's mind, like as if this was an evil Jedi, this is what would be going on. It's like telling the guard to put his gun to his temple, and he's like, sacrifice yourself to me. Like, yes, my Khan, and then boom, that's it. Heard a boom, and then hear the gunshot go off, and then the two guys come back, and look what they find. So now we got the good old federal building. And you've got Reinhard Lane, who's played by Ian McKellen, also known as Magneto. And he's working on a special project. And he's being accompanied by Tim Curry, who has been amazing throughout the years in multiple different roles. He played It, the old school one, obviously. Obviously, Ian McKellen. I go figure. This was probably the first movie that I saw him in. Ian McKellen being known most for Magneto, and of course Gandalf for Lord of the Rings. So, and then obviously Margo Lane comes in, and that's played by Penelope Ann Miller, obviously. So, and of course that dress. And then she's got like the classic Marilyn Monroe look in this one, but looks great. Penelope Ann Miller is just yeah, she was one of those women, man. I believe she also played in Carlito's Way, if I'm not mistaken. So they were very right to use that woman as the main woman of the movie, or the hot woman of the movie, because every time she's on screen, she always grabs your attention, which is something you can never really underestimate, especially when it comes to men and the way we are. And like Tim Curry over here in this scene, he's he was just kind of insulted by her or whatnot, and he's like, oh, what a fascinating woman. But when you're a chick like that, you're probably used to getting that kind of attention, and but the problem is that when you are getting attention from those people that are annoying, it becomes annoying, so to speak, if that makes sense. So yeah. But she's incredible, though. She's a great chick in this film. She does a great job. And in terms of the whole feel, in terms of when this movie takes place, it's like, this is how people, I guess back in the day, this is how people communicated a lot of the times, and the way they spoke and the way they expressed themselves and everything, really. It was a different tone back then. I mean, granted, I don't think, I definitely wasn't around back then, but it was a different time. People were different. The times are different. The like the how do I put this? The desire of what people want was different. I mean, at the core, it's all the same regardless of time, because we're human. But at the same time, when you have things that take place in the 30s, it's just a little bit different with the time. Like for me, I'm a 90s kid, right? So I can kind of understand the difference in terms of the times. There's things that are always going to be the same and that won't change, but at the same time, it's kind of like a flavor, almost like, I want to give an analogy here. It's almost like what Coca-Cola was back in the day of, like, over the years, Coca-Cola has tasted different throughout the years, right? And I haven't had one in years, to be honest. I quit sodas 10 years ago. And I'm sure throughout the years, Coca-Cola has tasted differently. So it's like that. It's kind of like the way people were in the 1930s compared to, like, let's say the 1950s or 60s, and then you got the 90s, and yeah, it's and over here, Khan over here has just taken a cab, and he's using his powers on the cab guy. He's using his Jedi mind trips on the cab guy, making him believe that he needs gas when he's got a full tank. And he's going to literally run into the full tank. And he's like, oh, this must be my lucky day. And he's going to full speed. And it's like he's just going berserk with all these Jedi mind trick powers. And then, of course, he has a laugh about it. And the thing is, John Lone, who plays Genghis Khan in this, you could tell he was also having a good time with this character. And at the same time, I think what he's wearing right now, in terms of all the robe and so, it looks like a samurai basically, which is actually there's a lot of silk. I'm pretty sure it was very expensive. Like, some of the things that some of these actors wear, or sometimes they'll even buy them from the set, or they might get they might get a discount or something like that if they're even lucky, but which I doubt though. But like, some of the things that these people wear on set is just tremendous. And I know that there's a few actors that take a few things home with them, like not like the most expensive stuff, but like a couple of things. Like, for instance, Mark Wahlberg, and this is very simple and cheap, obviously, but Mark Wahlberg from Boogie Nights, he still has the prosthetic penis that he wore for the end of the very film, when you actually saw what the entire film was talking about. So yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's still got the prosthetic. So it's just one of those things. And then you have an agent of the shadow right there in the form of a guard or a police officer, and you could tell because of the ring he wears. I'm assuming there's according to the shadow, there's dozens of agents all over the world. But however, there's, yeah, I know that makes sense. Dozens. It's by 12. So I'm like, yeah. So it's good that we have that. I mean, there's just a whole world over here that they can really take advantage of in this day and age. I'm telling you. And you got a little message over here that's going through all these pipes, and it's going to reach a headquarters that basically reports the shadow himself. So I would love for something like that to be in today's age. I think sooner or later somebody's going to make a shadow movie. I think Universal still owns the rights, if I'm not mistaken. So they can definitely make a shadow movie. I don't see why not. There has to be, like, I think in order for there to be interest in it, they either going to have to modernize it, or just keep it like it was during the 1960s, I guess, which is when this took place, either the 30s or the 60s, and basically turn it into, like, with modern day effects, and while keeping true to the story and the source material as much as possible, and altering very little in order to, appease. But the thing is, a lot of people still don't know about the shadow, so there wouldn't be a lot that there would be requested to change, because he's not as popular as some of the other superheroes out there. And the guy that takes messages from the shadow and gives it to him basically activated the ring, which happened like a minute ago or so. But and of course you got Mo, when he sees that ring is going off, he he gets people to their destination super quick, breaking the law to do so he can get to Lamont to bring him to wherever he needs to go, which is the Sanctum. And it's basically like his version of the Batcave, so to speak, but you don't see too much of it in this film. This is actually, I believe, the only scene where you do see it. And again, a lot of, well, it's not in his house, so I kind of like the fact that he's got it in a different place that's not in his house. I'd say that's the only thing. Like with Batman, the Batcave is like under the house, in terms of where Wayne Manor is. It's not far. But in this is a completely different location from where Lamont Cranston lives, which is good. So that way nobody would really find it. And speaking of nobody finding it, there is one man who actually not only found it, but is there, and that's Khan himself. So, and he actually wants to recruit Lamont, and not only recruit Lamont, but he wants to, he still calls him Yinko because that's what he knows him at. So, and then, as you can see, there's a lot of back and forth in terms of the old school, new school stuff. And I like that little library in the background, and you got the globe with back then, which would be amazing technology. And then of course you got the statues, which were worth God knows how much. So this is like his little bat cave or whatnot. And of course, actually maybe Khan wasn't there. Maybe Khan showed up like right behind him when he didn't know. And that's the thing, Lamont right now at this point, because he's not like at the top. He's good, but he's not like at the top of his game because he hasn't been challenged. So you're not going to be as good as you would be in your prime if you're not challenged to that certain extent, right? So it's kind of like being a black belt and you've like fought numerous other black belts that constantly challenged you and it made you better, and then all of a sudden there are no black belts left and it's just you, and you've got nothing but white belts that you have to go against, which is easy. But what ends up happening is you don't get any better, or you slightly regress because you're not challenged as much or whatnot, and there's certain muscles, mind and body, they're not being trained. So right now, this is where the shadow is at right now. It's like he hasn't been challenged by anybody that's like him, and right now you got that. So to a certain extent, the shadow is kind of rusty, because the thing is, if he was truly like at the top of his game, right, like to where he was in tip-top shape in terms of his powers, he would have known that Khan was following him and stuff. And you kind of, there's more of that in towards the later of the film, and it's implied that way. So that's the thing. He's been back in the States for too long and everything. And of course, the whole meeting starts obviously friendly, and he's trying to recruit him because he's an admirer of what he used to be as Yinko. So Khan wants to, he asks him for bourbon, of course, in a friendly way. He's like, I'll pay for it if you want. And he's like, no, not at all. He's like, friendly between two adversaries, but they're not exactly adversaries just yet. But it's going to be that way. But as of right now, it's, there's mutual respect, despite the fact that they, obviously, Lamont is good now, and John Lone's character Khan is evil. There's respect here, but at this point, after a while, it's like, no, I'm going to go in this direction, you can go in that direction, and that'll be that. So, and he's talking about a few of the things that he did back in the day when he was Yinko. So he's like, what brings you here now? He's like, my destiny, basically wants to. He's like, Genghis Khan conquered the world in half the world in his lifetime. I intend to finish the job. So, he's like, how do you plan to do that? He's like, if I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise. So, basically telling him how he traveled to the country and then absorbed his power, and in 3 days, in 3 days, the entire world will hear my roar. So. Now, and speaking of which, while he's in the middle of this, he's like, hey, that's a lovely tie. Where'd you get it? He's like, Brooks Brothers, 45th and Madison. He's basically telling me, hey, you're a barbarian. He's like, thank you. We both are. And he says, I know that there's a heart of darkness inside you. He's like, join me. We could do this together or whatnot. So only you deserve to be by my side, So it's like, tries to walk away, and he appears right behind him and everything. So it's like, yeah, you could tell right there. See, the thing is, when you got the Shadow himself, who's actually a very powerful character, that is basically in this scene and in many scenes to follow, seeming to be overpowered by this one other guy who just showed up out of nowhere. At the end of the day, it's like, you got to be aware. So, and they leave with him giving him a special coin. He's like, for the bourbon or whatnot. And then Genghis Khan, or Shiwan Khan, basically goes to work, and he tries to basically, he's resurrecting the Mongol warriors and all that kind of stuff. And he wants to do it in 3 days, to where he wants to take over the world. And, the Shadow is the only one that could stop him, but but obviously at this point, with that scene that just passed, you could tell that he's not in full power. You can tell that Lamont is outmatched at this point, like right now, at least, because he's rusty. But I think the difference between those two is that Lamont actually finished the training by the Tulku. And then later on, it's revealed that Shiwan Khan actually murdered the Tulku. So, but I don't think he completed training, though. And that's the difference. That's the difference. For those people that are fans of Street Fighter, that's why Ryu has a belt that has some embroidery on it, and Ken does not, because Ryu was training for a few years before Ken even showed up to the picture. So I think that's the difference. So just a little thing I wanted to add on there. And the sun is shining, but the ice is slippery, so it's the Agent of the Shadow. He's like, who? He's like, oh, I got you. So he asks for a metal analysis of the coin that Shiwan Khan gave to him. So apparently it was a rumor. It was a very rare type of metal, I guess. and the ancient Chinese believe that that's part of what was that formed the earth or whatnot. But so yeah, basically at this point with the coin as well, it kind of leads him to a clue in terms of what Shiwan Khan might be up to. And the fact that he's going to this man here who he rescued in the very beginning of the film basically leads him to what's happening next. So he's slowly but surely starting to figure out what is going on and what Shiwan Khan's plan is. So, and that's how it was basically. You had to travel and seek people out in order to get information. You had to actually go there. You had to seek things out. You had to literally talk to somebody face to face, as compared to now where so many things could be accessed with just the internet and with the phones that we have. So that's also fascinating to me. You know, as simple of a concept as it is, that's also fascinating to me. And at this point right now, he says the word. He's like, yeah, an atomic bomb. So, so we know now that he needs an atomic bomb, but who's going to make it? Where is he going to get it from? Blah, blah, blah. So, and then this man right here, he's like, unless the genius figures it out, it's impossible to do this. And then he shows him on the chalkboard the image. And as soon as this scene is over with, we actually end up fading into that image that's being created by Margo Lane's dad. And that's who Shiwan Khan goes after next. And I've seen this movie a lot through my childhood and even into my adulthood a few times. So I remember, and I did it a lot during my childhood. So I know which scenes are coming up next before they do. And you get this little scene right here to where from a distance, you know, Shiwan Khan starts to work his powers, so to speak, and he starts taking over Reinhardt Lane's mind. And even though he's got a very powerful mind, even though her dad has a very powerful mind, it's not powerful in the way that would guard him from something like this. His mind could still be clouded. So that's something that we got to remember as well. This movie subtly shows us that there's two different kinds of mind power. You know, you've got your educational side, right? You don't have, like, there's two different forms of education and genius. You know, it's kind of like comparing street smarts to school smarts. You know, both of them are very valuable and both of them are respected. So yeah, it's and it's good if you have both, obviously. It's good to have both. But some people are just more naturally into one over the other because of how they grew up. But and you see Mr. Reinhardt Lane over here is just like a traditional hardworking scientist, is working on his atomic bomb right here, or something that he ends up turning into an atomic bomb thanks to the mind influence of Shiwan Khan, and which he falls for. So, and there he is right there, Ian McKellen himself. You got the mustache going on, the scientist look, the classic scientist, and at the end of the day, he is a genius in this film. So it's yeah. And again, the cinematography is just incredible in this film. I mean, whenever you get, especially at night, you know, I really like this look. You know, I really like the cinematography. They really nailed it. Obviously, some of it has aged better than others in terms of everything, but man, everything looks great. And yeah, the guy on the poster wall that turns into Shiwan Khan. And yeah, there he is. Yes, my Khan. So back at the Cobalt Club once again. I guess that's his regular spot right there. And I guess Lamont's uncle always loves that prime rib. It looks like prime rib and some baked potato, of course. And then Lamont gets his usual 2 martinis. And you got the waiters wearing like some really cool shit and the gloves and everything. You thought some waiters look like penguins. This is a little bit completely different. So there's Miss Lane. All right, you can drop the act commissioner. Oh wait, he's a commissioner. He's not just the chief. He's the commissioner. So it's basically like Bruce Wayne and Commissioner Gordon having dinner, except they're kind of family because he's the uncle of. So, and this is the second time where Lamont and Margo meet, and she's kind of seduced by him, not because he's not even using his powers. She's just kind of seduced because there's a natural attraction there. So, it's kind of like that very beautiful woman. Like if you look at it from the eyes of a man, it's kind of like that very beautiful woman that just entices you. And obviously if you're mature enough, it'll be easier to resist or whatnot. But at the same time, you're a man, so it's kind of good to see that from the opposite side, to where a woman just can't help but take a seat if he invites her because there's like that attraction. So and yeah, and he spoke Chinese to Margo, and then that's when and then she talks about the implosive device to the commissioner and all that kind of stuff, and that, now he knows. Now Lamont knows, and he actually got up and left the table before she could even notice, and then she goes after him. And then the uncle, of course, the commissioner, is like rolling his eyes like, young kids. And then Lamont has to go, and she's following behind him. She's wearing a black dress this time, which is quite the opposite of that white dress. And then he's turning around looking at her, and he's got a serious look in his eye, but he hasn't changed his eyes, though. He's like, I'm sorry, I have to go. And then she says Yin Ko, and she's like, who in the hell is Yin Ko? He's like, wow, her abilities are going off. And then his face changes, his eyes turn dark, and he starts to turn into a shadow. He's like, you need to forget about me. You'll give me no further thought. He's trying to use his powers on her, and it's not working. He's like, are you drunk? I don't know what kind of women you're used to dealing with. And his powers are completely useless. He can't, And at the same time, not just that, because she's strong as well, but because he's not in full shape, so to speak. Strong, but not in full shape. And over here in this scene, as he gets in the car, he instructs Shredman to take him to the federal building, and he transforms into the shadow right there in just a few seconds. And the disguise comes on, and here we go. And I really like that old school effect of how they made him transform into the shadow, like how you see his face change. You can't recognize him, even though half of his face is covered and he's got the hat on and everything. You still can't recognize him. So I think those few seconds right there where he's transforming is like it's that part of the film that gives me some sort of, I don't know, it's kind of like Batman vibes, so to speak, but just different, because he's got powers and they all come from his mind. So the federal building's being attacked by Shiwan Khan's men, took out the guards that were guarding the front of Margo Lane's office, or Reinhardt Lane's office, and yeah, he's being possessed, obviously, and it's they want him, and they want the atomic bomb. And then the shadow is laughing in order to get the attention of one of the guards, or not one of the guards, one of Shiwan Khan's men, and he goes out there, and of course the shadow ends up doing his part and ends up kind of actually lifts him up with one arm, which shows that when he's in full power, he's actually able to have some super strength as well. But he struggles with the guard, because he struggles with one of the Shiwan Khan's men just a little bit, because, well, quite frankly, they're trained as well. So, and again, which shows that, again, he may be out of shape because he's dealing with people that are actually trained now, as opposed to people that are not trained. So, like, again, going back to martial arts, if you're a martial artist and if you're taking on people that don't know martial arts or don't know very much, and you do, and you're very well trained, even if you're out of shape, it's going to be an easy fight. But then all of a sudden, let's say you are going up against somebody who's got some experience, but not as much as you do, but you're out of shape, you're going to struggle a little bit because you're a little rusty. So, and over here, the shadow uses his powers and is actually taking out multiple men right here. They use the effects really good, and actually minimally in this scene up until the very end, where you see the shadow on the wall, and the effects on that aspect are a little cheesy, but they're nice. So it's really cool how this guy is being punched over here, and they can't tell what the hell he's being punched at. And you got one of the guards over here who's kind of frightened because his hand is shaking with the flashlight a little bit. And boom, boom, there's the shadow right there. That's all you can see is the shadow. You don't see anything else. So, but they actually fire at the shadow and it's actually able to do some damage, actually. So, you don't want to. I mean, he's protected, but at the same time, he's still getting hit. So, nice little effect how he's actually coming out of the wall through the shadow. But yeah, but at the same time, he took a hit, which forces him to. Since these guys are using crossbows, it forces him to use his guns. And that's pretty cool that actually beforehand, before all of this, before this last moment, he wasn't using his guns up until that moment to where he had to. So, which says a lot about the character. Like even here, you know, he wants to know about Khan, but he's holding on to one of the guys, or else, you know, if he lets him go, he'll die. But the guard, I mean, the warrior himself is actually like letting go on purpose uh, to serve Khan, basically. So, and that was from like the top of the building. And the guy lands and right next to Lamont's taxi, and then he goes to get back in the car, and guess what? Lamont's already there. Still in the shadow form, but he's injured. So he basically took a couple crossbows in the shoulders. But it didn't do as much damage, I guess, because he was in shadow form, but maybe perhaps it did. So, and he's being, and again, we cut to Reinhardt Lane calling Margo, and he's being completely possessed by Shiwan Khan at this point. He's holding up the phone and everything. So, and you could tell in this scene right here, in this upcoming scene, to where when Margo gets possessed by Shiwan Khan, because she goes to the office, she sees all the guards are down, and she sees the mess and everything like that. She goes outside and she gets possessed just like her dad did when he starts calling her name, right? So, which goes to show you right there, Shadow, Lamont, Cranston, he couldn't use his powers on her because he's out of shape. But Shiwan Khan is in very good shape, very powerful, and he's able to possess her quite easily. So that right there tells you, like, is the main villain more powerful than the hero? And right now, at this point, yes. The answer to that right now, at this point in time in the movie, is yes. And she goes to him, obviously. She's completely possessed. And basically, he's going to give her a mission to where he arms her with a gun. And she's instructed to go after Lamont. She's instructed to go after Lamont and to kill Lamont. And that is not, well, obviously, he wants to do it that way, but at the same time, it's also a test to see if Lamont can survive or not. And to a certain degree, he kind of almost gets lucky in a sense, but I don't know. But yeah, he's patching up his own wounds, as you can see in his own house, and he can sense somebody's coming, but he's kind of ignoring it. She's got the gun in her hand. Really good acting by Penelope Ann Miller over here in this scene. And there's a mirror. As soon as she opens the door, there's a mirror right there, and she thinks she sees him, but it's actually the mirror. His reflection. She doesn't know that. But obviously, Lamont is going to know as soon as that gun goes off, or moments after that gun, when that gun goes off. And just by looking at her, he can tell. Like she's off. Like he's like right next to her, and she's like possessed. And he tries to snap her out of it. Not working. And then he says her name. But he didn't even have to use his powers for that. And then she snaps out of it and she's like, "What are you doing here? I'm in your home. Who sent you?" So again, we see a little bit of Bruce Wayne and some Batman in here. And she's like, "There's a voice repeating over in my head that I had to kill the Shadow." And then now she knows he's the Shadow. He wants her to leave. Classic Get Out. She wants to see into his eyes. She turns around, bam, there he is, and activating his powers, because whenever his powers go off, his eyes change. Very similar to Shiwan Khan. And he basically tells her through and through that you're not, if you look into my eyes much longer, you're not going to like what you see. And she knows who he is, and he's not very happy about that. But at the same time, he can't fault her for that either. And his eyes turn back to blue. He wants her gone by the time he gets back. And she looks at him, she's like, how do you know? I won't tell anyone who you are. And he's like, I know. He's not that rusty to where he won't know, thank goodness. But he is rusty. You could tell. You read between the lines, he's rusty. He's had too many simple enemies to deal with. And he's out of practice. Because he hasn't had to deal with that kind of a threat. And of course, Mo is always there to take him whenever he wants to. And I guess they go to Chinatown, and one of Khan's men is following behind. But it won't be too long until he notices this. And again, the cinematography is excellent. I love how the cabs look, and the town, and the whole mood of the night. I love it. I am all about it. And then through the reflection of the mirror, he can tell that he's being followed by one of Khan's men, and he goes into a really dark area that's basically nothing but a shadow, and he literally disappears. From plain sight, at least. But but he's not very smart, and he just walks right by like, oh, okay, I guess he didn't go that way. And he lost him, and he couldn't find him. So now Lamont is following the guard, or the warrior, the Mongol warrior, so that way it can lead him to Khan. So yeah, pretty cool. And yeah, Sun Yat kitchen. So you see in this scene right here that Shiwan Khan basically eats with his hands, and he's just gouging down on, gulping down some Chinese food. I can't blame him. And I guess back in the day, that's all he knew how to eat. Like with your hands, you didn't use utensils, I guess. Because he's eating everything with his hands. He's not eating with utensils of any kind. No, not even chopsticks. And he's got the tie and everything. Wow, he actually looks like he kind of looks like a modern version of himself now. So he's got the suit, he's got the tie. And he's like, you sent Margo Lane to kill me. He's like, kill you if I wanted you dead, Yinko. I would have had your liver on a pole by now. I'm like, that's funny. He's like, I sent the girl to be killed. How'd you kill her? Oh, she's alive. So it's like, no, this scene kind of also shows that he did want him killed, but he said, no, if I wanted you dead, I would have had you. It's like just a, bad guy not admitting that his mission failed or whatnot. So this guy wants to rule the world, and then of course Lamont starts to get funny with him. He's like, I want to give you a name, brilliant psychiatrist. He'll talk, he'll listen, and then boom, slams the knife onto the table. And it's that one knife. He's like, I took it from the Tulku. And then now he reveals to him that he actually killed the Tulku with it, which doesn't make Lamont very happy. He's pissed to the point where he loses his shit, and you can't. And then he tries to grab the knife and stab him with it, but he can't because it's resisting him. And it doesn't respond to brute force. And he's like, you didn't master the knife, did you? The pulba. But so this scene kind of implies that that Shiwan Khan is better, like basically mastered things that Lamont didn't master. But we'll see if that's true by the end of the film. So he wants to join him again, and then Lamont's using his powers on the guys on Shiwan's guard right in front of him, and bam, he's able to get the gun. And then Shiwan kills one of his own men on the spot just like that for being weak. And then both those guys shoot at each other, and the bullets actually crash at each other, which is interesting. And then they both have interesting facial expressions. And of course, the old bad guy disappearing sort of thing, or the bad guy running away to escape through the window thing. And again, this also shows some vulnerability on the bad guy's part because he's getting away. And upon the chase, he ends up disappearing. And Lamont is not able to see why yet or how. But again, Lamont not being your average person because of the training and everything he's learned, he's able to notice something's off, but he can't tell exactly what it is yet. And again, he's just rusty. That's all. You know, my guess is by this point, Lamont really hasn't had to use his powers to this extent. So again, he's out of practice. And I know I've said that a few times, but it's just you can't help but just notice it. Like you see someone who is a little overwhelmed at this point and he's outmatched, at least for now. We'll see. But he still suspects something is up. He just doesn't know what yet. And he's looking into empty space, basically, into a bunch of space. But he thinks something's there. And then he goes back home. And Margo's still there. He wanted her gone, but she's still there. And she's in the living room. And then, of course, more reminiscent, a little bit more reminiscent of Batman, you get to see a huge ass fireplace. Or huge ass fireplace. And the windows are open. You see the wind. Nice little set over here. And coincidentally, she wakes up when he's right there, just as he walks in. And she's like, I can't help but know what I know about you. And nor can she forget it. And he's not powerful enough to make her forget it. So she wants to kiss him at this point, and he's like, it's late. Sleep here if you want. They're guest rooms. Very manly of him to resist her, if you ask me. And he says in the morning you should go. But he's saying it politely, though. He's not mean about it in any way. So. And she tells him she's not afraid of him. And he looks at her and he said, but I am. Now, is he afraid of himself or is he afraid of her? And he kind of has he's kind of has a dream. And in his dream, you know, he wakes up, she's calling him, and he wakes up, he walks over. And she's asleep in the bed, but then he looks at himself in the mirror and he starts like peeling off his own face or whatever. It's one of those weird dreams. So huh. And then when he peels his face off, it's like boom, you know, it's Shiwan Khan, who's someone else underneath. And she screams and then he wakes up. So kind of interesting. And there's Penelope Ann Miller just chilling, and he's already dressed, and she's not awake yet, or is about to wake up. Look at her all happy, like she slept really well. She's like, "Oh, I dreamed," and he's like, "Yeah, so did I." And then they share dreams, and she had a delightful dream, and then he reveals what he dreamed, and she's like, "You got problems." So, but yeah, very interesting indeed. Penelope Ann Miller really was something. And again, her red lipstick just never wears off or anything. It's like it's on all the time. Perfect. And then she's like, "What was your dream?" I dreamed I tore all the skin off my face and with someone else underneath. And she's like, "You got problems." And he's like, "Yep, I'm aware of that." So yeah, yeah. So she's already reading his mind, and he's like saying things. She's like, "Yep." She's already reading his mind at this point before he can say it. So he's an open book at this point. She can read his mind very well. If he was in full power, she wouldn't be able to read shit unless she's like that special woman for him, which could also be the case. But that's something that's kind of up to the audience. Is like, or maybe maybe it gets to a point to where he ends up just letting her in once it gets to a certain point. Psychically, I'm very well endowed. I bet you are. That's funny. My thoughts are hard to miss. This is funny. She's like, "I am coming with you," and he's like, "Okay." I like the way he said "okay." And Reinhardt Lane is telling Shiwan Khan about how big the explosion is going to be, and he's wearing like some really expensive shit, like really expensive. Like you can just look at it and it's like, wow, very expensive. And one dude just looks at him. He's like, "Hey, nice dress, toots," and blows a kiss at him. And then, yeah, Shiwan Khan starts to immediately use his mind games on him to the point to where this guy is going to climb up and toss himself over the building. Yep. And then yep, jumps off and he's falling. And then you start, and then you start to see these two walking. And now we know that Shiwan Khan needs a beryllium sphere, and she tells him about Claymore, her father's assistant, basically Tim Curry's character. So, and then they talk about where Khan might be and such and such. And apparently, the Shadow is going to go see Mr. Claymore. A very interesting setting. Basically, see a big ass sphere that could be filled with water, but Barley Claymore, for some reason, is going in there. Don't know why. Not sure why. I don't know if the Shadow himself basically lured him there somehow. But wham bam, here we are. I love Tim Curry's acting, I'm telling you. Like whether he's being funny or whether he's scared or whether he's a villain, That man is just so believable on screen. Tim Curry, incredible. Can't help but love the guy. And he fits in this movie so well. Great casting. And Tim Curry really is like he's also known to play like a few lovable villains. Like he's a bad guy, but at the same time you kind of like him. So he starts filling the entire sphere up with water with him in it, and the shadow's in there too. But he's able to notice that where the shadow is, and he shoots him. He's able to get one hit on him. And you could tell because of the water that enters the blood that enters the water. But the shadow is still unable to be seen because, well, he's a shadow. But he took a hit from the gun. So at this point right now, Claymore just locked him in while the water's filling the sphere. And now Lamont needs to get out of there, but he's going to end up being trapped. Yep, no way out. Got to take off that cape, man. Guns as well. Thankfully, he didn't get hit too hard in the shoulder. I don't think he got hit too hard in the shoulder. So at this point right now, he's got no choice but to use his powers. So he goes into a meditative state and is able to reach Margo, who's far from him. She's like, "What the hell?" He was like, "What?" So, and then she rushes over to his aid, and now the entire sphere is filled up with water. And smart guy, he goes into one of the bullet holes and is able to get a few breaths out of there, which is good, thankfully. And again, he tries to open it up, and he can't. But Margo's there, and there he is. Boom, boom. Open the door. And the door opens, and all that water comes rushing out, and she's barely able to survive that. Because with that kind of force, it would have taken her out. And Lamont gets out of there. He's able to roll out, and he barely makes it. That's another thing about this movie that's very unique. You see the hero in very unique situations to where he's very vulnerable. He takes his hits. You know, at the end of the day, he is human after all, and he just so happens to have these Jedi mind tricks and stuff. But I really would have loved to seen so much more because I think the Shadow is at least supposed to be an expert in hand-to-hand combat. So, and right now Lamont is having a terrible nightmare, and where he used to be his former self, and Margo is there. So, and then you get through a few flashbacks of basically a few of the battles or wars that he fought back when he was his former self, I guess. Very brief scene, but he thinks about it a lot and he says he can't forgive himself. So, but yeah, I guess he did take a pretty good shot in the arm from the gun. And she asks him, "Do you have any idea what it's like to have done things that you can never forgive yourself for?" So you got some character development over here. You got a guy who's really closed, but he's opening up, and then you got the beautiful chick who's actually going, who's actually, who's actually more than just the pretty chick. She's the one that you can, that actually talks to you and tries to help you and tries to bring you out of your funk, so to speak, and put some sense into you. You know, because at the end of the day, when it comes to heroes, one thing that's always made a difference for heroes is their significant other. When they're down on everything and they're at their weakest point, you know, that significant other makes all the difference in the world at the right time, especially. So, and then we've got the beryllium sphere, or the bomb, that's pretty much complete at this point, and they're going to set it off soon. And you know, Tim Curry's character being praised for victory or whatnot. And but at the same time, right now, he's kind of being put in his place, like, who's the boss here? You know, and then he finally says it and he lets him go. But John Lone really just, like, you can just tell he's enjoying himself in this role. So all gravy. Get a nice little overview of the city, which is probably a miniature from the looks of things, but good enough. Classic newspaper headline scene. And old school radio where everybody's listening. And now everybody's starting to find out about Khan, who's threatening to destroy the city, who's demanding billions or whatever, or something of that nature. And there's Russell the butler. I don't know if Russell the butler has, like, I mean, that's the only time you see him in the film. So it's like, is there a relationship between he and Lamont to the point to where it's similar to Alfred and Batman? I don't know. Doesn't seem like it according to this movie, but at the same time, movies make that mistakes all the time with characters. So, one of the most important things are the side characters, right? Like, for instance, a hero is only as good as the villain, right? It's one of the reasons why Batman is as good as he is. So after that, it's like, so yeah. So right now at this point, as Lamont goes through all the stuff that he's going through, he's starting to, like, his mind is starting to open and he's starting to get clarity again. Because at this point, at this particular scene, he actually can see now where Shiwan Khan disappeared to, because he sees the entire building and nobody else sees it. And he says he can't believe it. And it's a huge building and it looks beautiful. And now we, the audience, get to see it. Hotel Monolith is what it's called. And it's appearing right before his eyes, but he's the only one who could see it because the rest of the city is hypnotized under Khan's spell, so to speak, right? Or under Khan's powers. And nobody can see it. She can't see it either. She's trying to look and he can't see it. She can't see it. And then got a random guy off the street and he's like, "What's the name of that building, fella?" And he's like, "What the hell? You crazy. There's nothing there." And nobody sees it except for him. Not even she can see it, and she's got some powers of her own. So, which goes to show you exactly that, you know, Lamont's powers, like, he's starting to get better again. You know, there was nothing really that was implied that he lost his powers, but you just kind of have to look between the eyes. You know, he's starting to get back to where he was when he was like in tip top shape. You know, so the the athlete is getting in better shape now again. He's starting to get some momentum, so to speak. That was the first sign, was when he could see the building, because now he knows where Khan is, and he knows where the bomb is and all that other stuff, and he knows where he can attack or where he can sneak in or something like that. So, and yeah, yeah. So um yeah. So at this point right now, he's basically going to they're going to secure Dr. Lane in his own room now, and he's going to die by his own invention. Go figure. What a meanie. So in 1 hour they're going to leave, and there's going to be an airplane to take them to safety while the bomb goes off. So at this point, you got headquarters for the Shadow, basically writing in invisible ink that yeah, we've got stuff coming. You got messengers delivering messages, of course, which is great. You kind of love to see it. And all these guys are wearing rings too, which is pretty cool. And then you got Mo, cab driver, who gets a message thrown like under his door, and he goes to see it, and of course he knows what it is. And he's the only one who could see it too. Well, at least for a while. See, the letters just appear, and I guess they re-disappear or something like that. Margo got her own message, and then the letters disappear as well, which is pretty cool. And then there's the Shadow himself. He knows where the building is, and there's guards there, but only he can see them. So easily takes out the two guards in the front center with really cool special effects. And when the door opens, you see nothing but the Shadow, which is really nice effect. A little dated as far as like how it's moving, but other than that, it's a Shadow. Doesn't have to be the most amazing effect, but you know, frame rate could be better. But hey, this is 94, and then kind of almost looks like a cloud, and then appears. Nice little effect with the wind and everything, in full suit. And then the trademark Shadow laugh, echoing laughter. And now he knows that he's in there. Shiwan Khan knows that he's in there, which surprised him. And now Tim Curry's character is like, well, can you tell if he's mad at me? Because we had a little thing yesterday. Then he gives him a gun. He's like, find him and kill him. Like, me? He's like, no, all of you guys, find him and kill him. And then Tim Curry's like, can I just stay here and help you? No, go. So, and of course, the Shadow is actually, all these guys split up, and then the Shadow basically is going to go after Claymore, Tim Curry's character. And he's armed with a Tommy gun, and he goes into like a really big dark room that's like empty, but a big room nonetheless. And the doors are closing. And now Shadow's starting to mess with him. And he's firing at the Shadow, but nope, no effect. And at this point, Claymore just goes nuts and starts just shooting in circles while laughing. Tim Curry humor, so to speak, at this point. And then it gets all quiet. And then all of a sudden, he's like, coward, chicken, sissy, come out here, fight like a man. And then it's like and then things get dark. And then he's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. And then, very interesting that the shadow kind of creates an image that makes him look way bigger. And he just grabs him and scares him. And yeah. Basically, it's like the shadow, but like 10 feet tall. And he creates an exit sign for Claymore, and then Claymore just laughs and just goes right towards it. So basically, what Shiwan Khan was doing right there, the shadow just did to take out Claymore at this point. So yeah, see, even the good guys can do some fucked up shit still. And then Mo and Margo out there in the rain. And Mo's like, you know what I like about this job? The excitement. Ah, yes, finally. The shadow versus Han. Tries to shoot him, but it's not going to work. Changes the floor up a little bit. And of course, the Pumbaa knife. Puebla knife. I don't know how to pronounce that. Pulba. And of course, as we can see, that is something that he is still struggling. He actually just got stabbed with it. And Han is completely in control of it. And it's dragging Shadow around like crazy. And again, his brute force is just not, he's not able to control with the brute force. And as an audience, you're starting to wonder, like, okay, is the knife like the kryptonite for the Shadow? And then you see him without his mask on here, without his face covered. You see his face looking all different, and then he starts to turn into his normal self. And he says it right there. That's where it's acknowledged. It's like your mind is too weak. You're losing your power. And then the knife looks like a scorpion at this point, just messing with him, and it's just toying with him and gonna try to stab him again. And struggling. And it's trying to stab him through the throat, but at this point right here, Lamont just closes his eyes and starts to concentrate. And he starts to loosen the grip on the Puebla knife. And he's like really like kicking it into high gear, and then the knife's like, what the hell? So the knife stops trying to attack him, and then Khan tries to overpower it, but he can't. And then he gets the knife to turn on Khan, overpowering Khan. And then he opens his eyes, and he's like, his eyes are glowing and shit. So it's like, for the first time ever, Khan is overpowered, and Khan like gets hit in the film by the knife. And then the building starts to appear, and everybody starts to see the building that Lamont has been seeing all this time. And his grip on Dr. Lane is nowhere. It's loosened up. And then Dr. Lane's looking around. He's like, where am I? People in New York are like, where the hell did this building come from? So he tries to run away, of course, like always. And Lamont at this point is just, at this point, he's too powerful. He finds himself being easily more powerful than Khan. Tries to follow him, and luckily he found a way. And he still likes to use his guns, even though he's not going to use them. He still likes to pull them out. Natural instinct, I guess. And then we got a room full of mirrors over here. Hey, Margo finds dad. Nice. And he's like, where am I? What's going on here? And then she's trying to explain. He's like, I'll tell you later. All right, so big mirror room, nothing but mirrors. And then there's Khan, tries to shoot him, but he shoots the mirror instead. So it's like at this point, it's like, dude, you don't even need to use your gun. So at this point, they only have an hour left on the countdown before the bomb goes off, and he needs him to disconnect it. Now we got a classic case of blue wire, red wire. Oh boy, countdown's going down faster because he got rid of the wrong wire. Oh boy. And then the bomb fell and it's rolling around everywhere like a ball. Funny, funny, funny. Now they got 2 minutes before the bomb goes off. And the bomb rolls down the stairs, almost taking both of them out. Oh, whoa. This movie. Uh-oh, the old classic 30 seconds left. And now he's got to choose between two colors. And the thing is, his character is colorblind. So he's green is red and red is green to him. And the way he chooses it is, oh, well, hell, it's usually green. And then he cuts the red one. But miraculously, it it works. Thankfully, they got the right one just with 1 second left before that thing was going to go off. Classic movie. And then you've got here, they're in the mirror room again. And Shadow starts to really amp up his powers. He starts making all the mirrors crack and explode with just his sheer power. And Khan is basically helpless at this point. Really cool effect. A little old school with some of the effects, but cool nonetheless. So, which just goes to show you how powerful Lamont really is when he lets it all loose. And then there's a sharp piece of mirror on the floor, which he's controlling, and of course, boom, right in the forehead. You get a glimpse of it too. I wonder how close to an R rating that got the film. But what that did ultimately was it got rid of his mental abilities, his Jedi mind tricks at this point. Because at the end of the film, he's taken to a psychiatric hospital or whatever, and he attempts to clone. He attempts to cloud the doctor's mind, and it seems to work, but it doesn't. It doesn't. So, all because of that wound to the head. Yeah. Hmm. It's like it's almost going to begin to work. He's like, look into my eyes. Yeah. Release me at once. And he's laughing. No, we won't have any of that, Mr. Khan. Thankfully, he's fine as far as his abilities go. But he's basically been reduced to a regular human at this point. And more to it than that, the Doctor was also an agent of the Shadow. Go figure. So he's fine, but he's doesn't have his powers anymore, and he's stuck in a psychiatric hospital. And you get the classic hero and the significant other making out or kissing, and it looks like he's going to go into the sanctum. So how will you know where I am? And they're wearing the same clothes that they were in the first scene that they had together, I think, too. And then of course he says, "Oh no." And then he goes around the alley to where you don't see him, and then the last glimpse you get of the picture before things fade is a close up of the Shadow's face, and then you get to see the Shadow logo where you just see his eyes, and like I guess it's the cartoon logo or something like that, or the animated logo. And then you see nothing but his eyes, and then that eventually disappears into black before we get into the credits. So, all in all, 1994's Shadow, in some ways back in 1994 again, was beyond its time, and at the same time, in some ways, you can definitely tell its age. However, it's a classic film. It's a classic film that a lot of people from the early 90s, early to mid 90s could appreciate, like myself. And it's basically just kind of a little bit of nostalgia and a little bit of memory that's brought in there. Um, and it just has a unique look about it. The film has a unique look. It has a unique cast, and it's overall a fun film. It has a few serious moments as well. It has its comedy as well. But overall, it was a fun film. And for me as a kid, when I saw this the first time, I think it was in 4th or 5th grade. When I saw this, I absolutely loved the film. Every single time it came on HBO, I watched it, and then eventually I would rent it from Blockbuster multiple times. And I don't know if I ended up buying it or not. But all these years later, go low and figure. I mean, I'm on a quest to get all the movies that I grew up watching as a kid, whether I own them or not, especially the ones that I own first and foremost. And then after that, I'd go after the others. And one day I was like, let's see, what movie do I want to get this time? And thanks to Amazon, I looked it up and I got it. And I think, what was it, like $10 for the Blu-ray edition of this film? And here we are. We just finished the commentate over it. So it's a film that I grew up watching quite a bit, that I thought was really cool back in the day. And it's a film that I appreciate. Would I absolutely like to see a modern day version of the Shadow in this day and age? Absolutely. And I think at one point in time it will happen. Hopefully someone out there is gonna know and understand the story to a point to where it may get some traction going. I don't know exactly how you would 100% modernize it, but one thing is cool is you can do a lot of cool effects with the Shadow. You could do a lot of cool things with the martial arts, the training aspect with the Tulku that we never really saw in this film. You can make the villain even more like the knife that's basically alive, that can come after you, but it doesn't respond to brute force. You have to be mentally strong enough to control it, things like that. There's plenty that you can do with the character of the Shadow. It just so happens that a lot of it just so happens that it's just not as popular, I guess, for whatever reason. So yeah, The Shadow, great film. Well, not great film, but good film. It's a fun film to watch if you're a fan of classic 90s that take place, a classic film that came out in 1994 or in the 90s or whatnot, but the film itself taking place from times earlier than that, then I would say this film is something that I think you could appreciate. And to a lighter extent, I mean, it's got a little bit of Batman vibes. I think if we were to bring out more of the dark aspects, I think it would be really cool. And even back in the day, the visual effects were good. Obviously, some have aged more than others in this day, but all in all, fun film. Penelope Ann Miller was definitely eye candy. Alec Baldwin did Alec Baldwin, and then everybody else was a terrific supporting cast. John Lone, who played Shiwan Khan, I'm pretty sure, just absolutely loved playing this role, and you could tell because of just how he did everything. So and just how and you could just tell through the performance as well. So he just let it all out, man. So but yeah, that was The Shadow in 1994. I hope you enjoyed listening. And for those of you guys watching along, what did you think of The Shadow? Did you like it? Did you, is it bittersweet? What is it? And would you like to see a Shadow movie in this day and age? Or should it just be left alone to what it was? Anyway, thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.